Alright, if you guys could do me a favor and let me know if the music is too loud, that would be appreciated. Please and thank you. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for rolling on in here. I appreciate it. I'm just getting stuff sorted. Hi, Stay. I had to get a mod really quick because I noticed my other one was not around, so apologies for the delay. I'm just getting stuff set up over here. Alright. And if you see me looking off to the side, it's because I have stuff on the second monitor. I wanted to have the story right in front of me. Please do let me know if the music is too loud or if you can hear it at all. I don't want anybody to not be able to hear me. Okay. Thank you. Alright. I am actually going to do this. Give me 2 seconds, I am moving things around. Alright. Thank you, Harpex. Alrighty. Is everybody ready? So, for those of you who were here last night, I started my first actual story stream. I will be reading my own stories. I know somebody in here earlier tried to post a link. Unfortunately, I have links disabled at the moment. So I apologize for that. That is because I am a brand new streamer and I'm trying to keep some of the unwanted spam down. I know that you want to share that story and I appreciate that. But as I said earlier in the chat, I will mainly be streaming my own stories. Maybe at a later time I might branch out into someone else's, but at this point in time I will mainly be streaming my own. As they are my own, I do have a bit of a disclaimer. You can check that out in my About section in my Twitch page if you like. Last night we read chapters 1 through 4 of my first story called Reflections of Padawan. And tonight we will be continuing with chapter 5, and we will see how far we get when I decide that I'm done reading for the night. So, hope everybody has your snacks and your water, and let's go ahead and get cozy. Alright. Okay. Chapter 5. She sensed him when he was still halfway down the hall. Putting down the book she was reading, she called out, "Enter!" as she felt him approach the door. Einar entered, looking solemn. "Are you ready, Padawan?" Nodding, Callista rose and drew on her robe. Her twin lightsabers hung at her side as she followed him from the apartment. It felt a little odd to be carrying both. She was a little nervous about meeting the General Din, head of Galactic Defense. Taking a deep breath, she released her nervousness, letting the Force replace it with calm. The transport let them off in the plaza fronting the Galactic Defense Building. Making their way across, they paused at the checkpoint. "Identification, please," the sentry asked in a bored voice. Einar straightened. Master Einar Algeron and Padawan Jacerin to see General Din. The man straightened as well. "Ah, Master Jedi, you are expected. Please, go right in." Both Jedi bowed and passed through to the lifts. The ride up to Ari's office was short, but silent as both kept to their own thoughts. Reaching her level, they exited and stepped out into the office foyer. The young woman sitting behind the desk straightened when she saw the two Jedi. "May I help you, Master Jedi?" she asked. Einar bowed. "Please inform General Din that we are here to see her." Nodding, she keyed the intercom. "Excuse me, ma'am. There are two Jedi here to see you. Please send them in, Ensign." "Yes, ma'am. Right away." The receptionist nodded to them. "Go ahead." Callista followed Master Algernon around the desk. Entering the office behind him, she paused and bowed to the general. "Good day, General Din." Ari remained silent as the two entered, and the girl greeted her. She rose from her desk. Her gray uniform was decorated with many military ribbons, catching the sunlight from the massive panoramic window behind her desk. She walked around her desk, her hands behind her back as she studied the young woman. "You may leave, Einar. Thank you," Ari said quietly, sensing a slight ripple from Einar, but then calmness from the Jedi. She knew Einar had expected to stay with Callista on her first day with Ari, but she wanted to talk with the girl alone. Einar made a half bow towards Ari and excused himself from the office. Once alone with the girl, Ari circled her once, silently looking her over and sensing her through the Force. "Do you know what pain is, Callista?" Ari said after some silence. Callista nodded in reply. "When someone is hurt, it's caused by an emotional or physical wound," she replied. "That is the textbook answer," Ari replied quietly as she outstretched her hand towards her left boot, her tiki blade flying into her open hand. In a flash, Ari snatched Callista's hand up with hers and ran the tiki blade across the young woman's palm, bringing a sharp wince from Callista and blood from the cut. "General!" Callista protested, trying to pull her wounded hand away. Ari looked at her hard and set the knife on the desk. Her right hand still holding Callista's wounded hand, she placed her left one on Callista's temple. Immediately, the pain Callista felt from her cut ceased. She looked down at her hand and watched as the cut on her hand sealed up and disappeared, as though she had never been cut. "You see, young Padawan, that pain is merely a signal response from nerve endings to the brain. Pain is only in the mind. The mind makes it real. We deflect the signal, and pain is felt no more," Ari explained. "This is your first lesson, how to master pain, then how to deflect it. It's much like mastering fear. I'm sure Einar has taught you that lesson, has he not?" "Yes, master," Callista replied softly. "Good. Follow me," Ari said, her tone lightening as she led Callista from her office to a connecting adjacent suite. They entered the room, and Callista was amazed to find shelves upon shelves lined 3 of the 4 walls filled with actual books, ancient texts, scrolls, hollows, data disks, and various charts. Callista also noted a display case on the wall housing several lightsaber hilts, but noticed that Ari did not carry a lightsaber herself. "You will come here every other day for a lesson, 3 times a week. You will meet me here in my suite unless I am indisposed. I will inform my receptionist to expect you. You will begin reading my books if I am late or tied up in a meeting," Ari explained. "Which ones?" Callista asked. "Start with this wall and work your way around the room until you have read every book, text, scroll, and chart on healing techniques," Ari informed her. Callista sighed heavily. Becoming a master healer would require much work, as Callista was now beginning to see. "Now, I want you to practice mastering pain for the rest of the afternoon. Cut your hand, cause a bruise, or break a finger until you can master the pain and heal these small tests of pain. From there, we will move on to something of a larger scale. I will take you to the infirmary once you have mastered the basic techniques," Ari continued. "All right, master," Callista agreed. "I must take leave of you now. I am due to a conference with Mjag," Ari informed Callista as she began to leave her alone in the office. "Master," Callista turned quickly. "Yes?" Ari asked, pausing at the door to look back at the young woman. "I'm sorry about your husband," Callista sympathized. "Stories about my life will come later. For now, study," Ari returned, exiting the office. "She has talent. Let's see if she can master the skill," Ari said to herself, smiling as she walked down the hall. Watching the general depart, Callista wandered slowly around the room, taking in the sheer volume of books and materials. Glancing down at her left palm where Ari had cut her, there was not even a scar to be seen. Her mind still whirled with the implication of what had just occurred. The pain had felt so real. She thought back over what had happened when her hand was cut. Ari had placed her hand on Callista's left temporal lobe. Picking up Ari's tiki blade from the desk, she pricked her finger experimentally. Concentrating, she was able to follow the path that the pain signal sent to her brain, locating and blocking it out. The blood stopped welling out of the small cut, and it sealed as if it had never happened. Okay, that worked. Something else now. She took the hilt of one of her sabers in her hand. Holding it in the reverse of normal, she whacked herself soundly across the shin. Grunting with the impact, she was able to shunt the pain aside and turn it into energy, which she then used to heal the purpling bruise. She continued this for about an hour, progressively stepping up the amount of pain with each injury. She thought for a minute, what would really test my ability? She hesitantly reached up and grasped her right shoulder. She shoved hard, almost passing out from the pain before she remembered to put up her block. Holding the arm still with her left hand, she rose from the chair she had been sitting in. Making her way over to the doorway, she turned around so her back was to the frame. She backed up, knocking her right shoulder solidly against the doorframe. She sat down hard, gasping from the pain. Her block had not been strong enough. It took her a moment to refocus past the pain, strengthening her block until the pain dissipated. She placed her free hand over the muscles of her shoulder and focused through the force, bathing the wound in healing energy. She could almost feel the muscles repairing themselves. She rose shakily to her feet, the adrenaline still coursing through her. She wandered over to the near wall of books, glancing over a few titles. She had not heard of a great many of them. Running her hand along the books, she felt impressed to pick one up. Her hand stopped on the spine of a leather-bound volume, which the title read, Pain Suppression and Force Healing. How appropriate, Callista mused, a small smile forming. She withdrew the heavy book from its spot on the shelves, lugging it back to the couch. Sitting down, she placed it across her knees and began reading. She had learned many things in her training with mana, but some were new to her. She was unsure when she had fallen asleep, but she woke up several hours later to find someone had closed the book, marked her place, and covered her with a blanket. For those who... I'm going to pause there for a minute. For those who are new to my stream, there are a few commands on my About panel, if you'd like to take a look. One of them is story fact, so if you have something in the story that you would like to know a little bit more about, you can use the story fact command. Keep in mind that these are they are based in the Star Wars universe, but they are kind of an alternate universe, original characters, and things that are not strictly Star Wars, but things that I've been kind of working in for the last 20 plus years that I've been writing. So if you have questions or comments about anything that I'm reading, please feel free to use that and ask me a question in the chat. In some of my later stories, I do use some Mandoa words as well. So when you hear one of those pop up, you can use the translate command in the chat to ask me to translate it. Actually, I'm going to do this right here. There we go. I don't know if that worked. I am attempting to use closed captioning, but I don't know if it's working, so we will find out. Oh, thank you. So yes, I am attempting to use closed captioning in my stream. I don't know if it works yet. That's for anybody who may be deaf or hard of hearing. So I'm attempting to use that in my streams to be a little bit more accommodating for people that might have that difficulty. So while I'm on a pause, does anybody have any questions or comments? Keep in mind that this is chapter 5 of 10. We did chapters 1 through 4 last night. So please feel free to ask any questions at this point if you like. If anybody was not here last night, the VOD from that stream is up. So if you were not here, you can feel free to go back and listen to that as you're going about your day or your evening. Depending on your time zone, of course. So feel free. Also, I do have my Archive of Our Own linked on my main page, I believe. So if you want to go read that way too, you're welcome to. Alright, if there are no questions at the moment, I will continue with the chapter. I just figured I'd pause there since it's a scene break and see if anybody had any questions. Oh, thanks, Cypher. I appreciate that. I put a kind of mild disclaimer out there that this particular story was one that I wrote back when I was 17 or 18. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're listening. It's something that's haven't really touched for quite a long time. So it's kind of surreal to be diving back into it at this point, and I've always enjoyed writing them. So I felt that I wanted to share that with people. So all right. Okay. But yes, there is a short list of commands down on my about section. If you guys want to make use of them, please use them sparingly. Please don't spam. I unfortunately will not have any kind of emotes or fancy redeems until I hit affiliate, so just keep that in mind. Oh, I know. Yeah. I used to write cooperatively. These stories, when I started writing, I was writing with a group of 5 to 6 people, and everybody's kind of moved on with their lives. So I have continued the more recent stories. I've actually focused more on my characters in particular, rather than kind of including theirs all the time. So I've tried to shift the focus a little bit in that way. So, all right. If everybody's ready, I will continue reading the chapter. Yes, that is an automated thing that pops up about every 20 minutes, just as a general reminder for people. So, okay. Callista once again found herself in Ari's study. The receptionist had let her right in, commenting, "The general should be along shortly. She left instructions for you in the study." Callista smiled briefly. "Thank you, Ensign." Entering the office, she made her way into the study. There was indeed a note on the desk. "Callista, my apologies for not being able to speak with you the other day regarding your lesson. You did well. Today I would like you to continue with the book you started and work on honing your sensing skills. I know Master Card has taught you how to do this. Keep up the good work. General Din." Smiling, Callista well remembered just how Stefan had taught her. The relief she had felt upon her full release into the Force. The book she had been reading still lay on the low table in the study. Settling onto the couch, she picked up the book and started to read again. It was not long before she heard voices in the outer office. Ari's receptionist was speaking to someone. "I'd like to speak to Padawan Jassarin, if I may," a male voice said. Looking up from the text she was reading, she saw Master Card entering the study. "So, how's your studying going?" Smiling, Callista closed the book she had been reading. "It's going well, although I haven't seen much of the general for the last few days." "I'm afraid the general has had to deal with other matters," Stefan said as he sat with her. "Even though you've been through many studies, a lot in the galaxy requires her attention as well as the rest of us." Nodding, she thought a moment. "Isn't it a bit odd for my study to be self-directed, though?" "Not really," he told her. "Some study better in different ways than others." Stefan smiled as he thought about it. But not that I'm saying that you are, Callista, but your skills as a healer seem to grow more than anything else. Blushing, she looked down for a second. It's almost second nature to me, a matter of instinct, really. It's as I've always told you. We are called upon for different things. My skills are with the sword. Your true talent lies in the healing arts. It seems like all I ever do is read books. Isn't there another way to learn? She paused, blushing again. I'm sorry. That was very forward of me. With healing, Stefan began to say, I'm afraid there is only one way to learn and test other than the books. I hope, though, that you'll never have to be called upon for that. But he looked off into the distance, out the windows. I feel that it may happen. Frowning, Callista gazed back at him. What do you mean? In meditation, the council is getting premonitions that there may be very trying times ahead. Stefan stood and walked to the windows. I can't fully explain what we have felt, Callista, but I feel that your skill is to be called upon a lot. But surely you can't mean... Her voice trailed off as the implications of his words hit her full force. I don't know for sure yet, he said as he turned to her. We are trying to fully understand it ourselves. All I can ask is that you continue studying and possibly help teach some of the younger healers. And what of the other teachers? Mana? Ari? I've asked Mana to do what she can, Stefan told her. But Ari is constrained by her duties to the New Republic. He sat back down. And I feel that some of the trouble we will face will come from those she has to answer to. Her face slackened in shock. Not another Palpatine situation. I don't believe that it is the same, he assured her. No, the powers behind this lie outside the Senate. But with the Bothans pushing their agendas and their skill in political posturing, they are definitely in league with something stronger. Should I discontinue my studies with the general so that she can focus more? Stefan shook his head. She has access to material that you would not be able to find at the temple, particularly this. He called a book over from the wall and set it on the table, her personal journal of techniques. Callista thought a moment. How would you suggest I go about helping to teach the younger healers? Most of my time is spent here. I think you're well enough in your other studies that we can arrange some time for that. All right. She got a mischievous look in her eye. Do you think she would be mad if we had a little saber practice in here? I have confidence in your control of the saber at this point, Stefan said with a smile, but I don't think her study is the appropriate place. Where would you suggest? Stefan had to smile at that. She may be learning as a healer, but her heart still lies in the sword at times, he thought to himself. The observation platform, he told her as he got up. I will expect you at sundown. I will be there. Take a drink. Stefan sat on... Hi, Kala! Stefan sat on the ledge of the observation area, hood over his head and eyes closed as he waited there until he felt the presence behind him. A few moments late, he said softly while sitting there, but one cannot predict nature. Callista bowed as he turned to face her. My apologies, Master Card. I had a few things to attend to. As I said, the timing wasn't important. Are you still up for that lesson? She nodded and came to sit next to him on the ledge. I am. He nodded softly and turned to look at the cityscape below. Clear your mind of thought. Relax yourself before we begin. I do! It's do exclamation point hydrate. Like I was saying earlier, there's a short list. There you go. There's a short list on my about page. Yes, I have a few. They're pretty basic, but I have a few. So I have hydrate. Yay! Espresso! Awesome. Give me 2 seconds. I'm going to pause. I probably should have gone over it at the beginning. Give me 2 seconds while I look at that. Actually, yeah, it's right on my main page. So my stream commands are hydrate, snack, hug. You're gonna want to put either some text or at somebody with that. Very funny. Give me 1 second. Story fact, which if you do that one, I'll answer any a question you have about the story. Translate, that's mainly for some of the later stories. I use some Mandoa words which may not be immediately understood, so I will gladly translate those if you guys prefer. Um, and then I have an eye drops command because I spend all day looking at screens at work, so I was having trouble with my eyes last night, and so I had to pause and get eye drops, so I added an eye drops command. So if you see me doing this, like, continuously, please redeem the eye drops command so that I can go deal with that. Um, and then I have a exclamation GN in chat for good night. Yeah, I spend so much time looking at a screen that by the time I get home, I have to make sure that I do eye drops. So because Cypher redeemed the snack command, I'm gonna go get one. So I will be right back. Yeah, I don't ever use them 4 times a day. Maybe twice if I'm lucky. So give me just a moment. I'm gonna flip to my BRB screen, and I will be right back while I get a snack. I need something to take with my meds later anyway, so be right back. Okay, thank you everybody for your patience. I am back now. I'm just getting that situated. There we go. Alright. Had to. There we go. Oh, sorry about that. Goodness. Settling herself on the ledge, she gazed out at the cityscape momentarily before letting her eyes drift closed. Then she sank into the force, finding her calm center. The sensation of riding a great current was there once again. Stefan sat there, considering some of the feelings he was picking up from places all over the planet. Sometimes the best way to end the battle is never to start it. Turning to look at him, she asked, "How would one accomplish that?" "I have tried to study that for some time," he told her as they kept looking out across the city. "One would be so well accomplished that no one would want to chance certain defeat in engaging them. I would think that these people could learn from the lessons of the past, but they never seem to. They always believe that they can take on anything and cause chaos. They fight for the glory of battle?" "No," Stefan said as he closed his eyes. "People who fight for glory also know where to find it off the battlefield by protecting others. It is something my people understood centuries ago. All anyone worries about now are themselves, how they stand to gain from the suffering of others." She thought a moment on that. Again, she remembered her classmates' derisive laughter at the misfortune of others. Her heart ached whenever she saw someone in need. "It is important to know how to defend yourself and others in battle," Stefan told her as he sat there. "But what is more important is to know why you go into battle, and that is the lesson I wanted to teach. To defend those who cannot do so for themselves. And sometimes it's more than just the battlefield," he said softly. "It also happens in other types of battlefields, and that is some of what Master Ari has been dealing with." "The Senate and the military?" "There are many levels. Sometimes we're not prepared to face all of them. But they do come, and in my way I feel comfortable fighting in combat. You have the advantage of knowing who your enemy is." She thought over that. "But with a political body such as the Senate, your enemy is not as apparent." "Exactly. Luckily, that is one you'll never personally have to face," Stefan told her with a smile. "I'm glad of that." He grinned at her. "Well, now that that particular lesson is done." She smiled at him, rising to her feet. Pulling for her twin sabers from her belt, she turned to face him. Stefan nodded softly and drew his lightsaber, igniting the blade. He stretched out and set himself into his guard posture. No limits this time. Nodding, she let go into the force, setting herself into a mid-guard, one saber raised over her head while the other pointed towards Stefan's midsection. Stefan changed his stance, letting his saber go loose in one hand while the other stretched out, and motioned to her in a taunt. Instead of falling for it, Callista began circling him slowly, her sabers held ready. She could feel him calculating moves in his head. He waited, circling with her, his hands back on his lightsaber as he paced slowly around her. Staring into his eyes, she readied herself. She let her eyes drift closed and reached out with her senses instead. Testing her senses, Stefan eased in slowly, touching the tip of her outstretched saber with his, waiting for her reaction. She batted it away, coming in with her second saber, scoring a hit on his left arm, which left a red welt. She pressed on, working to break past his defense. They drew in close, each fighting for the center, their sabers a blur. Stefan found the opening, parried one blade aside, and struck a touch to her midsection. Before she could even come up for a counter-strike, Stefan called a second hilt from its hiding place and began to fight her with two sabers of his own. She grunted, blocking the pain and refocusing on the battle. 2 against 2 now. This should be interesting, she thought to herself. She backed off a step, feinting to the left, and came in high with her left-hand saber while her second blocked a low strike from his. He countered the next strike and whirled around with the motion of the block to intercept another attack. He stood his ground and lunged once, waving his sabers in a move that would have bisected her, but she scooted back away from the strike, and they just stood there, facing one another. She gazed at him, her breath coming fast in her lungs. She still held a guard position, waiting. I shouldn't have put it past him to have a second saber, she thought to herself. Stefan nodded and stood, relaxing his stance. Always expect the unexpected. Always mind your surroundings. She nodded, lowering her saber as she relaxed. Thank you, master. Well done, Stefan said as he returned his to his belt and nodded to her again. You're improving. I was surprised when you pulled the second saber, but I should have known better. Well, you never know what you're going to be hit with, Stefan said as he regarded the other lightsaber he used. You just never know. She looked at the saber he held. One of yours? No, Stefan said as he closed his eyes. It was one of my friends. She felt the anguish coming from him. I'm sorry. Stefan shook his head. You noticed the red blade of the lightsaber? He handed it to her to sense the spirit of it. A classmate of yours, Welt, turned to the dark. She trailed off, noticing the tears in his eyes. Aye, Stefan said as he sat down and began to tell her the story. And that is chapter 5. I may have time to get through 2 more chapters this evening. If you guys want to hang around for that, just give me one moment. Alright. Okay. Chapter 6. It had been several days since Callista's lesson with Master Card, and she took some time to check in with Master Azad. She had progressed far during her time at the temple, on her way to becoming one of the most skilled healers. Mina was proud of her Padawan. She applied herself diligently at her studies, finding ways to practice the techniques. Her natural skills as a healer served as a solid foundation for what she learned here at the temple and in her lessons with General Din. She listened intently as her Padawan described some of the things that she had been learning with the General. While she did not approve of some of the General's methods of instruction, she could not argue that they weren't effective. Callista, I have a small mission for you. There has been an outbreak of the Krellian flu in Coronet City. The council has asked me to send you there with a shipment of the vaccine and to serve in a medical capacity. Callista couldn't hide her surprise. Master, I'm in the middle of my studies. Surely there is someone else? Mana shook her head. The council asked for you by name. Callista pondered that a moment. I can be ready to leave in an hour. She rose from her seat and went to pack, stopping in the infirmary to pick up her precious cargo in its sealed container. Before she left, the staff made sure she had received her own vaccination. The flight cabin of the small courier ship was quiet as Callista made the hyperspace transit. Suddenly, the stillness was shadowed by an ear-splitting alarm, and the ship dropped abruptly out of hyperspace. Looking at the navcom, Callista found herself in a small system halfway between Coruscant and Corellia. Looks like I have to replace the motive radio coil. I hope there is someplace on this planet that has one. She set the ship down on the outskirts of a small city and left the shuttle to look for a mechanic shop. She found one easily enough and purchased the part. On the way back, she passed many people. One in particular stood out to her, but the feeling she got off of him made her skin crawl. In spite of everything her instincts were telling her, she approached him. Can I offer assistance, sir? You're injured. The man straightened up at once. Like a wild animal that finds itself confronted by a predator, the look in his eyes was unfocused, nearly delirious, and as he sized up the young woman, he seemed to grow only more tense. Seemingly by instinct, he clutched his leg with his hand. What business do you have with my afflictions, young Jedi? Callista backed off a step, startled at the look in his eyes. She gazed back at him. I can heal your leg for you. The man's eyes seemed to relax the slightest bit, though his body was still tense and ready for action. Fancy yourself a healer, do you? I am a healer, sir, both by skill and training. Her hand hovered near her saber as she was still uncertain about him. The man tried to smile, but at that moment his leg buckled and his smile became a grimace. Stepping forward, Callista caught him, slipping his arm over her shoulder. Let me help. Please. It seemed at first as if the man was trying to come up with some snide remark, but another grimace made it clear that the pain had overcome his regular reasoning. My wound is no mere scrape, young Jedi, he said at last. Are you so sure of your abilities? She nodded silently, remembering just how she had learned that particular lesson from Ari. She shuddered slightly from the memory. For a long moment he was silent. Finally, relaxing his body, he put his weight onto his good leg and slowly picked himself up. Very well, then. Let us see what the young Jedi is capable of. Supporting him on the other side, Callista made her way back to the courier shuttle. She could sense the effort it took for him to stay upright, and she hurried him aboard, helping him settle onto one of the bunks. Kneeling in front of him, she carefully lifted his leg, gently peeling away his leg wrappings. He winced, and she sent out calming waves, easing and helping him to block the pain. My thanks for your assistance, young Jedi. There are few willing to help one such as I. He closed his eyes, seeming to focus for a second, and a deep, almost invasive chill came over her. Perhaps you would have been better off trusting your first impression of me. She glanced up quickly, her focus faltering as her hand drifted towards her saber. Your leg is broken. The man locked eyes with her for a long second, his eyes still showing the pain that he tried and failed to mask. So it would seem. She shivered slightly as she searched at the searching look he had given her, and then she refocused on his leg. I'll have to set it before I can repair the damage. He tensed again. Be done with it, then. His hands curled into fists, and he set his jaw firmly. She nodded, and grasping his ankle, she pulled firmly. She felt the bones scrape one another as they moved back into place, and she once again eased his pain through the force. Settling his leg across her knees, she placed one hand gently on either side of the break, bathing it with healing energy. Despite her attempts to ease his pain, the man couldn't help but let out a groan. Nonetheless, he seemed to calm down, and sinking back onto the bunk, he remained silent as she finished her work. She glanced at him. I would recommend staying off that leg for a couple of days, so the bones have a chance to knit. Of course, he said, slowly opening his eyes. The wound had taken its toll on him mentally, and with the pain gone, he seemed to be drifting towards sleep. You need not fear me, Jedi. Not all of my kind are as malicious as you may think. She rose to her feet. You are welcome to stay and rest. I have a few repairs to make before I can continue on my way. Nodding slightly, he sank further into the bunk as he answered her. My thanks again, young Jedi. Your kindness will not go unrequited. Smiling slightly, she turned and made her way to the small engine room of the courier ship. She had a motivator to replace. It was found easily enough as she slid it out of its slightly blackened housing. The part itself was charred beyond repair. Replacing it was a different matter. She scooted under the hyperdrive, her hair brushing the base of it as she reached up inside to replace the motivator. That finished, she made her way back to the flight cabin to test her repairs. Passing his bunk, she saw that he was sleeping soundly, so she let him be. Back in the flight cabin, she routed power through the new motivator and was gratified when it responded. I should still be able to make my delivery on time. She sensed him as he approached the flight cabin, and she glanced up. Feeling any better? Considering my state previously? Yes. His eyes had calmed down, holding only a calm intensity within them now. As he approached her, she saw that though he was still walking with a fairly pronounced limp, he moved fluidly. Your skills are greater than I had expected. She flushed slightly. My thanks. I do what I can. The man smiled back. There is no wrongness in taking pride in our accomplishments, young Jedi. You needn't be modest about your talents. She really smiled then. I guess I am at that. I don't like to boast, though. I have a delivery to make to Corellia. Is there somewhere I can take you? He nodded. You have helped me enough as it is, but passage to Corellia would not be unwelcome. Beyond that, I don't wish to disturb what business you may have. Corellia it is, then. She input the coordinates into the nav comp and lifted off, engaging the engines. Rising stiffly from the pilot's chair, she turned to her companion. My thanks for your company. It was very welcome. She picked up the crate and made her way off the ship into the bustling Coronet spaceport. The man hesitated for a moment and then called out to her, Does young Jedi have a name? She paused, smiling. My apologies. Callista Jacerin, sir. He smiled and gave a small bow. Thank you for the transportation, Callista. If you have any need for my services, ask for the name of Mephisto. For what help I can give, I will be glad to repay my debts. Thank you, Mephisto. She bowed back. If you need me, I will be at the med center over that way. She pointed towards the center of the city. I will keep it in mind. For now, may the force be with you, Callista. As he walked into the bustling crowd, a chance billowing of his cloak revealed what was unmistakably a lightsaber. A Sith lightsaber. Her eyes narrowed as she glimpsed what could only be a Sith lightsaber. Shaking her head, she continued on her way, thinking only of his kindness. Not all Sith are as they appear to be, she thought. The med center was crammed full of people. The situation was so bad that the doctors and nurses had to step over them to reach other patients. It was organized chaos. Callista made yet another round through the crowded halls, trying not to trip over people as she went. She was surprised at the calmness displayed by the city's inhabitants. They calmly followed any instructions that the medical staff gave. As an orderly helped a young woman down the hall towards Callista. Healer, this woman needs to be delivered now. She is full term. Nodding, Callista moved to the woman's other side, helping her to an exam room. The orderly helped the woman up onto the bed and helped her lay back. Turning to the orderly, Callista said, Get me as many towels as you can find and a pair of surgical scissors. The orderly nodded and raced from the room as Callista turned to calm the young woman. She looked to be not much older than Callista, and she seemed a little overwhelmed. Her face softening, Callista asked, If you would like me to, I can lessen your pain during the delivery. The young woman nodded, her breath coming fast as she struggled to control her contractions. Resting her hand on the woman's forehead, Callista sent calming waves at her, lessening the pain of the contractions. Just then, the orderly returned with an armful of towels and the surgical scissors. An hour later, Callista settled the newborn child in the young woman's arms and stepped out into the halls. They had cleared quite a bit as the staff worked to treat those affected with the flu. She made her way down the hall to a comm terminal and punched in the code for the temple. A young woman answered and transferred her to Mana's office. Her mentor's face brightened when she saw who was on the other end. Callista, how goes the situation there? Callista took a deep breath, centering herself after such long hours. It goes well. About 80% of the population has been treated. I think the staff here have it under control now. Her face glowed as she remembered the small life that she had helped to bring into the world. And we have a new addition. A baby was born today. She brushed some hair out of her face, and Mana looked at her intently. You need rest, Callista, and I think that you need to get away for a while. I'm sure Master Card would love to have you visit Catan. Having concluded her business at the med center, Callista once again boarded the courier ship. Once on board, she put in a call to Master Card on Catan. Stefan was bouncing little Catherine on his knee in the living room when the comm signal came in. I got it, he told Jade in the kitchen as he went to the wall panel with Catherine in his arms and routed the comm to the imager. Well, Jedi Jacerin, this is certainly a surprise. Callista smiled as she caught sight of Catherine. I'm sorry to bother you, Master, but I was wondering if I could come stay for a few days. My mission to Corellia is complete. Corellia is only 2 jumps away, Stefan said as he thought about it. We have a guest cabin that's not being used, and you can use the hangar here. I don't see a problem. I appreciate it. It's been a while since I was away from the temple. I could use a little time. Stefan smiled and shifted Catherine to the other side. You know where Catan is? Callista shook her head. I have a rough idea from my stellar cartography course, but that's it. 3 parsecs rimward of the intersection of the Corellian and Rimma trade routes, Stefan told her. I'll make arrangements to get you through the system. She nodded, remembering the Katani Defense Force. Thank you. Don't worry, Stefan said, picking up on her nervousness. We're great to friends. She chuckled a little at that, laughing for the first time in days. I have quite a story to tell you when I get there as well. Well, I look forward to hearing it, Stefan told her with a smile. Call us when you get in the system. Will do. She nodded and cut the connection. Entering the coordinates that he had given her, she paused for a moment, reaching out with her senses until she found him. Be well, Mephisto. Turning to the controls, she lifted off from the plaza and was soon in open space. Give me 2 seconds here. I swear, I don't touch my glasses and I still get smudges. Don't know how that happens. Sitting here trying to read and I've got smudges everywhere. Story of my life. I'm like sitting here like folding my hands on the desk so I don't touch my glasses. So I'm like, how am I getting smudges all over them? Craziness. Alright. There we go. Dropping from hyperspace just inside the system, Callisto once again keyed in the comm code for the card residence. Stefan, he heard Jade's voice in his mind. Callista is in the system and on her way. I've got the transponder for the hangar activated for her to home in on. Good idea, Stefan thought. This was the young Jedi's first visit. She didn't need to get lost. The control board beeped, signaling a homing beacon, words are hard today, had been activated. Locking onto the signal, Callista guided her ship down to land softly on the tarmac behind the card residence. She rose from her seat, grabbing her bag from the co-pilot's chair, and stepped out into the bright sunlight of Catan. She half expected to see Master Card waiting for her, but instead there was a young lady, close to her own age, waiting for her at the boarding ramp. Callista? She called out and bowed to her when she came down. Good to meet you. My name is Andrea. Callista smiled when she saw, instead of Master Card, what could only be one of his children. There was a definite resemblance. Hello, Andrea. My thanks to you and your family for your hospitality. She bowed slightly in return. Well, we're always happy to have company, Andrea said as she gestured toward the path. Come on, I'll take you to the house. Smiling, Callista fell into step beside Andrea. It's beautiful here. Coruscant feels so stark compared to the life here. We've tried to keep as much of the natural life here as possible, Andrea told her. The only places that are even going to resemble a city are the capital and the 3 major port cities. All the other communities are small villages and townships. Callista nodded. It's very peaceful. She paused, thinking once again of her encounter on her mission. Andrea looked at her. Are you alright? You're preoccupied. Callista glanced up. I think so. It's just something that happened on my way to Corellia. Oh, Andrea said as she motioned to the wooden house across the lake. We're almost there. Callista gazed across the lake and found herself relaxed as she took in the simple house surrounded by trees. If it's not too much trouble, I'd like to speak to Master Card as soon as I can. I think he's instructing Irenaeus at the moment, Andrea told her as they started going up the steps to the house. I can take you down there if you like, but it requires a lot from you. Callista raised an eyebrow at that. He has instructed me in the lightsaber many times. I would be honored to be part of that. You promise not to reveal this to anyone? Andrea asked her, her look serious. Callista nodded, sensing the seriousness of the moment. You have my word. Don't mean to go overboard, Andrea told her. She led Callista to the fireplace, but it's something that this family keeps secret about this house. Only a few outside of it know. She nodded silently and followed Andrea into the fireplace once the paneling slid aside. What is this place? I can't remember how far back the place was built, Andrea said as she rested her hand on one of the rocks. But the house has been in the family for generations. It had taken a few moments, and then Callista stepped back in surprise as a section of the wall began to move away to show a stone staircase. "Follow me," Andrea said as she started down the steps. Callista made her way down the dim stairwell, trailing her hand along the wall to guide her as she reached out through the forest. Andrea led her down into the cavern, the lighting showing Callista the smooth surface with markings, circles, and ancient script written in the patterns. "The training circle," Andrea whispered to her. "Funny, I thought that they would be here." And that is chapter 2. Yep. I can definitely read one more chapter if you guys would like. Give me just 1 second here. Okay. I guess the good thing about these chapters is that they're relatively short. So I can definitely do one more chapter this evening. Maybe a fourth one. We will see how far we get. Chapter 7. Andrea closed her eyes and stretched herself out in the forest for a few moments before she looked over at Callista. "Okay, Daddy changed plans," she told the young woman. "It will be a while before he gets home, so I guess we get the time to show you around some." Callista smiled slightly. "That's perfectly all right. Lead on." Andrea smiled and started back up the steps, making sure that the door was closed after they came back into the living room. "Well, I don't know where to start," she said as they walked into the kitchen, "but I would guess you might be at least a little thirsty after your flight." "I am. And being in a hospital for a week doesn't really help either." "I can imagine," the voice of another woman said from the kitchen as they entered. "This is my mom, Callista," Andrea said as she introduced them. "I won't go into the formal title." Callista smiled and just bowed before one of her hosts. "We've heard a lot about your progress," Jade told her as Andrea went to pour some water for them. "I hope your trip went well." Callista paused a moment. "As well as can be expected, I suppose." She accepted the water from Andrea with a smile of thanks. "It certainly was interesting." "I guess we'll hear all about it later," Jade said as they sat there. "Stefan and Renia should be back from their trip soon, but it'll give you time to settle in." "Come on," Andrea told her with a smile. "Dad was talking about the guest cottage, but I think Dylan's room will be all right while he's at the academy." Smiling back, Callista nodded to Jade and followed Andrea from the kitchen. "Any chance I could freshen up before dinner?" "Sure thing," Andrea said with a wink. "Dylan and Renia share a refresher, but you can use mine." "Thanks," Callista laughed. "Us girls have to stick together," Andrea said jokingly as she led the way up the stairs. "That we do." Callista followed Andrea into one of the upstairs bedrooms, noticing how neat it was. "Here we go," Andrea said as she opened one of the doors. "It's Dylan's old room, but he's only here when he's on break from the Jedi Academy. Mine's just down the hall." Callista glanced at her. "The Academy?" Andrea looked over. "You didn't know about it?" "No, I guess Coruscant keeps pretty much to themselves, although I'm not sure why." "Well, it's not a known fact," Andrea told her as they walked into her room and they sat down on the bed. "After the Peace Brigade aided the Yuuzhan Vong against the old academy on Yavin 4, the Jedi decided to keep the location of any future facility secret. They first re-established it on Ossus after the war was over, where the library used to be. So, why rebuild the temple then? It doesn't make sense. The council decided that their presence on Coruscant might prevent so much of the sentiment that was sweeping the Senate when the invasion came, and I guess they decided it was time to reestablish some of the old ways. Coruscant has always been the center of it all, and it was a place where the Jedi have always been. It was before Daddy began training, so I wasn't even there for that, or when the academy was moved to the old facility on Chandrila." Callista thought that over. It makes sense, I suppose. Andrea just shrugged and sat there for a few moments. Oh, where are my manners? She gestured to the other door in her room. You wanted to freshen up. Grinning, Callista followed her across the room. It's not a problem. I know you probably don't get a lot of visitors here. Usually just Ari or Einar, Andrea said as she opened the door to the refresher. Sometimes other members of the council, friends, and families from here. Andrea suddenly noticed a picture she usually kept on the mirror and suddenly pulled it off and hid it. Hiding a smile, Callista set her bag on the counter and dug out a fresh set of robes. Andrea blushed slightly as she put the picture away. I'll be downstairs if you need me. Thanks, Andrea. When Andrea had gone, Callista stood there for a minute, getting a sense of the room. It was filled with joy and hope. She smiled as she said about washing up. The little baby she had helped bring into the world was still fresh in her mind. She finished up and making her way back into Dylan's room, she laid down on the bed. She didn't know how long she had slept, but she woke to Andrea shaking her gently. Callista, dinner is ready. She sat up, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. I'll be right there. Okay. Let me take a drink over here. Master Card, Callista said as the dishes were being cleared away, I think that there is something about the mission I need to talk about, in private. Stefan looked over to her from where he was putting plates up to wash, and nodded softly. Very well. He led her out of the kitchen and across the living room into another room that she hadn't seen yet. The sight of many books on the shelves amazed her, along with another shelf that held lightsabers of different sizes and styles. She immediately recognized the one he had used against her in their last duel and wondered if the rest were from friends or enemies. This is my study, Stefan said as he poured himself a glass of Katani ale and sat down in one of the chairs away from his desk, motioning for Callista to sit in the other one. Something troubled you on your trip? Not in the normal sense of the word. She paused, gathering her thoughts. I had to put down halfway between Coruscant and Corellia for repairs, and I encountered someone. She put a slight emphasis on the word. She frowned slightly, remembering. He was injured, so I offered my services, and even in spite of the feeling that I got from him. She shivered slightly from the memory. He unnerved me a little, like he knew what I was thinking. She proceeded to describe what had happened while she had worked on his leg and the change in him afterward. She paused, debating whether to tell him about what she had seen as he left. Disdain at the beginning, Stefan said, as he leaned back and sipped his drink. It would sound like a dark Jedi or even a Sith. She nodded at the last word. He carried a Sith lightsaber, but he did not harm me. You're certain? Stefan asked as he sat there. I am, Master Card. He never once raised a hand against me. And certain he was a Sith? Stefan again asked as he leaned forward. A dark Jedi I could understand not wishing for combat, but a Sith, as far as I have read in history, they have always hated us with a passion. Not all Sith are as they appear to be, Master, she smiled slightly. He was adamant about repaying the debt he owed me. Certainly not what I was expecting. Stefan nodded softly. I will admit, they have secrets that we've not even begun to grasp. It's possible that they do not all hold to the old ways. Like the Jansari, in fact. How do you mean? I guess history isn't one of the subjects they would cover with you, Stefan said with a chuckle. The Jansari were discovered by Master Skywalker and Corran Horn after the formation of the Jedi Academy. They had been taught in the ways of the Sith, but here's an interesting part of that story. They never really gave in to their hate and only used their Sith abilities in defense of their own. We've tried to stay in touch, helping each other when we can, Stefan told her. It's not something that's been common knowledge. It probably explains why it wasn't covered in my history class. Probably, Stefan said with a smile. Having concluded her discussion with Master Card, Callista wandered out of his study. The house had quieted after dinners as everyone went their own way. Making her way upstairs to Dylan's room, she removed her boots and settled onto the floor. The mission had taken a lot out of her, but she had certainly been up to the challenge. It wasn't every day that one got to deliver a baby or even help a Sith. That alone had been a challenge in more ways than one. It was her first solo mission away from the temple and her instructors. Definitely made one think on their feet. All of the students were taught about this hatred that all Sith harbored against the Jedi, or at least that's what they were led to believe. Callista now knew differently. Either Mephisto did not hold to all of the ancient teachings, or he had come to understand more of the Jedi than to just let the centuries-old hate fester between them. His acceptance of her help, albeit reluctantly, was evidence enough. She had gone against her initial reaction of revulsion to offer him assistance when he needed it, and he admired her for that. It definitely took guts. Most Jedi would have left him, but as had been proved time and again, Callista was not the average Jedi. Okay. Callista had been sleeping fitfully until Stefan woke her in the dark. No one else stirred as he led her away from the house and into the woods. It was so dark that she couldn't even see her own hand in front of her face and had to rely on her senses to guide her. They came to a clearing where a large plinth was sunk into the earth. It was some sort of marker covered completely in Katani script that Callista could not read. Stefan stood for a few moments as they stretched out their muscles. Finishing, he traced the script with his finger. She looked at him, sensing him beside her more than seeing him. What are they? These plinths mark places that hold an important place in our history, Stefan told her. This one in particular has been here for a millennium. She frowned, trying to read the script chiseled into it, but could not. What does it commemorate? She asked. A special and interesting story, he said with a smile as he sat down. Millennia ago, Catan was nothing but groups of warring clans. One of them, the clan Tritok, was able to unite a few of the other clans under one banner. When the patriarch of the clan died, he had left two sons, Rendalo and Etaro Kylan. Rendalo, being the elder, assumed control of the union and started becoming ruthless. Callista settled onto the cool ground, wrapping her cloak around her feet. Etaro was his best general, but was soon to see how his brother was abusing his power. One day, Rendalo's nephew was riding with him and was about to kill innocents for pitiful reasons. Etaro felt this was dishonorable and challenged him according to tradition and killed him. Stefan lowered his head. Rendalo had his own brother put in irons and then sent him out to be crucified. Nodding, Callista listened quietly as he continued. When they found out who he was sent away. Etaro searched for a chance to redeem his clan. It took him all over the world until he disappeared for a long time, and no one knows what had happened during that time, Stefan said as he looked up towards the dawn. When he returned, he had a strange light in his eye. Some say he was visited by the lady herself. He began bringing the heads of other clans together, bringing common sense and a leading voice among them. The last great war lasted for a long time. When the final battle came, it was like nothing in the history of my people before or even since. This spot, Stefan said as he held his hands out, motioning to the field around them, is where Etaro took his brother's head, and he himself took upon him the responsibility of uniting all the clans. No one else felt so much courage and honor in one man. And so, he continued as he stood up, came the creation of what you've seen and heard about us, our code of honor, our way of life, duty to family and country. It all started here. Callista rose with him, her breath frosting in the cool morning air. With the beginning of the day, you can experience something you've never felt before during your meditations and exercises on Coruscant, Stefan said as they enjoyed the morning. She smiled, remembering how different the planet had felt to her. The life of the planet itself? One reason we've tried so hard to never take more from our home than what we need, he said as he closed his eyes and just breathed it all in. A new experience for you if you wish to go through some of your practices here. I would be honored. Stefan smiled and completely surprised her, turning in an instant as his blade came alive. He He had hoped to test her reaction to surprise, and he was close enough that his move would definitely test her. She sensed him turning and snatched her blade, activating it mid-swing as she turned to face him. They were so close that when their blades intersected, their faces were mere inches apart. Focus, and you can feel it, Stefan said as he pressed his movements, the sensations from the battle ages ago. She reached out, and it all came crashing in like a tidal wave. The determination on both sides, the loss. She sneaked her left foot out, hooking his ankle in an attempt to throw him off balance, and then she danced away from his blade. Stefan came up, a grin on his face as she was quick to pick up on it. Just don't let it completely take control, Callista. But you feel the intensity? She nodded and set herself as he came towards her once more. She attempted to come in high, but Stefan quickly snapped her blade aside, lowering himself and as he caught her in a sweep that sent her down onto her back. He then came in for an overhead strike, but she was quick to turn it into a roll that took her away from him and settled back into her fighting stance. Good, Stefan said as he kept pressing in. Don't surrender ground. Press when you see it. Callista barely nodded, and before he could counter, her second saber was in her hand and slicing upward as if she meant to bisect him at the hip. The saber in her left hand parried his counter-strike. Stefan barely saw the second saber come into play, and he lifted himself into a graceful leap that landed him on top of the pillar behind him. He stood there, his saber gripped firmly in his hand as he looked down at her. Excellent, Callista. She inclined her head and made a graceful leap to land next to him, her sabers ready. Tight control, Stefan said as their sabers whirled within millimeters of each other. Excellent. Remember, foot space is scarce here. Mind your surroundings. He switched to a backhanded form and kept looping his saber in wide infinity arcs, catching hers in a block with every stroke. Expanding her senses, she took in the pillar, Stefan, and the ground around it. His saber was a blur, and it was difficult to find an opening. She parried another strike and danced carefully around him. There. His right leg was trailing outside his defense, and she brought her saber in low, grazing his leg while she blocked his high strike. Stefan caught the slight touch and flipped to prevent a second strike, landing softly on the ground and looked up at her. You're improving, he told her as he shut down his saber. Pretty soon I might have to increase the level that I'm using against you. Come on down. I believe Jade will have breakfast ready by the time we get there. Smiling, she flipped backward off the pillar and landed softly beside him. That sounds wonderful, she said, and her stomach growled a hearty agreement. Callista made her way into the cavern and the training floor below. The room was cool and dim. She moved off to the perimeter of the circle, feeling that it was not her place to intrude upon it. Centering herself, she began moving through a kata, concentrating on the flow of the movements as she moved from one to the next. The force began to swirl around her as she moved. Her twin sabers wove intricate patterns in the air, the hum echoing in the large space, lunging at an imaginary attacker. She came in high, slashing diagonally towards the floor. She whirled, landing in a crouch as she sensed someone else in the room. Every fiber of her being was tense for action. Her left hand extended behind her, the blade raised over her head, while the other was held low, the glowing blade pointing towards the floor. The flicker of movement caused her to turn her head, and she cranked her left wrist around to block a strike that seemed to come out of nowhere. Make your movements more fluid, Stefan said as she paused during her kata. She barely nodded, working to hold back her opponent. The brilliant green blade that crashed against hers highlighted Andrea's face on the other side. Well, this will be something new, Callista thought. The two young women ranged all over the training floor, their blades flashing in the dimness. Andrea's skill was impressive, her concentration unwavering. The green blade of her saber was a blur as she defended herself against Callista's attack. The two young women ranged... Even during the flurry of battle, Callista studies Andrea's moves, recognizing them quickly. Another practitioner of Form 4. Reacting purely on instinct, Callista dropped under a strike and aimed at her midsection and scissored her legs around, knocking Andrea's feet from under her. Andrea responded immediately by rolling with the motion of her fall and assuming the high guard, going for strikes low and high from the same guard. When she sensed Callista's lunge, she flipped over the attack with just a small amount of space between them and tapped Callista on the shoulder as she landed, going back to a more standard guard. Blocking the pain from Andrea's strike, Callista rolled away from her and settled herself in a low guard. She fights well, Callista thought. Andrea circled around like a Krellian sand panther, her thoughts only on the fight, and her face still a calm reflection. Stefan eyed the combat with a critical eye. Turning sideways, Callista presented her side to Andrea, both sabers pointed towards her opponent. Shifting her weight, she leaped towards the other young woman. Andrea stood her ground until the last moment and then parried both of Callista's sabers upward and grabbed her leading arm. Using Callista's momentum, she rolled and tapped Callista again as she came up. She kept her stance, but looked down and noticed that Callista had tapped her as well. Don't feel so discouraged about this one, Stefan told her. I told you that Andrea has trained differently than Master Faulkner taught you. We were just about to tune a few of the ships if you'd like to learn some things that they don't teach at the temple. Callista grinned. I would like that very much. We can see if yours needs some work too, Stefan said as he led them further into the cavern, opening a set of doors that separated the training area from the larger section. They came to a streamlined ship that looked like it would rival a Corellian action series in size. All aboard, Stefan said as he started up the ramp. I wouldn't be surprised if it does. I did a pretty hasty patch job on the last mission. Patch job on what? Andrea asked as she turned to look at her. I had a motivator blow out on me halfway between Coruscant and Corellia. I had to put down for repairs. Daddy, I'll take her down and have her show me some of it and maybe we can get it taken care of, Andrea said as she looked over at her father. Go ahead, he told her. I can handle White Squall by myself. Andrea punched in a few commands into one of the wall panels. Watch out, she told Callista as she finished entering the commands, looking up in time to see the Charmac that Callista had landed her ship on start to descend into the hangar. Callista jumped slightly in surprise. I didn't know that it could do that. A lot of what's under the house is possibly as old as the house itself, Andrea told her as the ship kept lowering down into the cavern. We passed under the lake when we were walking from the training circle to here, but these are the only two areas that aren't known to the others. Why was I shown them, then? The ship stopped in front of them, and Andrea pulled a remote from the panel and stepped onto the tarmac, Callista eyeing her. The only ones that we trust to know them are Jedi, and only those close to us, Andrea told her. Come on, we have to go lower to the service area. Nodding, Callista followed Andrea onto the tarmac and onto the service gantry. The setup here for servicing ships is extensive, more so, I think, than the temples. Well, my ancestors took advantage of this deep part of the cavern, Andrea said as they started going further down, and it comes in handy for us now. There was a lot of controversies a few years back over a totally new craft Daddy didn't feel that the New Republic could control, with all the political powers who would love to flex their military muscle, so he decided to keep it here. He only uses it when absolutely necessary. I think I remember something about that. Don't remember much about it, though. Mobile suits, right? Correct, Andrea said as she hit a key on the remote, causing the lights to their left to come alive, highlighting a machine that stood 60 meters tall. Whoa, it's huge. Andrea just nodded. I've never seen anything that contained such power. You're looking at something that could have stopped the Reborn Emperor's Eclipse-class Star Destroyer all by itself. A dead silence followed that comment as Callista was speechless. I know. As morbid as it might sound, I actually have fun learning all the operating systems on it, Andrea said as they reached the service area. Just the technical side of me. Callista just shook her head. I think I'll stick with courier ships. Thanks. Andrea just smiled. Speaking of which, you said it was the hyperdrive? Yeah, the motivator blew halfway to Corellia. It sounds like they didn't go over it well enough before you left, Andrea said as she traced along a few of the panel lines before locating one and opening it. Callista nodded. Not like they had time to, either. It all happened really fast. Before you left Coruscant? Andrea asked as she went into the shop to retrieve a few tools. They could have at least gone over it while they were loading. The motivators are supposed to be checked regularly. Yeah, it's odd. She trailed off as her thoughts returned to the encounter with the Sith. Andrea turned and looked at her again. There you go again, she said as she started removing the inner housing so she could pull the motivator. Sorry. Now that I think about it, though, I think it happened for a reason. I needed to be there at that moment. Andrea nodded as she finished removing the braces and gently lowered the motivator onto the cart. It's not ours to question the will of the Force, Andrea said as she moved it over to the table where she had the tools ready. I will say this. It is not an encounter I think I will ever forget, and I think we may meet again soon. We? Andrea asked as she looked up from the motivator. Callista flushed a little. I ran into a Sith on that planet. She glanced up as Andrea paused. Her eyes went wide at that revelation, her hands still on the table. And you didn't fight? No. He never even laid a hand on me. It was I who helped him. Wow, was all she said as she started to remove parts from the motivator and checked over everyone. Encounters with them didn't used to be as widespread as they are now. Callista nodded. Your father told me once that they were resurfacing, but he doesn't know why. We had faced them a while back, Andrea told her, on Korriban, the old stronghold. Daddy used to tell me how there would only be 2, but now there are many of them. Yes, they are returning into a widespread order, much like we are or used to be. There it is, she said as she removed the core. You said you had to fiddle with the wires? Yes, the wires were loose, and when I replaced it, it looked like it had suffered a power surge. Well, your repair held, Andrea said as she removed the spun wires. But the emergency stuff isn't supposed to last long. Look at some of the degradations. These would have gone out again on your next jump. It's a good thing we decided to go over it. Callista let out a nervous chuckle. Me too. I would hate to be stranded in the middle of nowhere. Or worse, Andrea told her as she went to a cabinet and pulled out a replacement. Dad used to use the temple shuttles for a while, and luckily we still carry spare parts. Thank you for the reminder. Let me just find the bottle. Oh, not the reminder that I was thinking about. Sorry. Alrighty. Thanks. Yeah, I've been sitting a bit. Alright, Alrighty. Yeah, cramping is no good. Does anybody have any questions about what we've read so far? I have peanuts. Alright, I think I may actually finish this chapter and go ahead and call it for the evening because I need to get ready to go back to work for tomorrow. So, but we're just about done with the chapter, so it's actually a good time. Thank you guys for hanging out. I appreciate it. And we're just gonna finish this out, and then we're gonna call it a night, which will leave us starting chapter, I think it's 8 next time. Yes, we'll start chapter 8 next time. Okay. Alrighty. I am very glad that you do, for my sake. Andrea just smiled as she put the new coil into place. We'll have you up and running in no time. Callista just then remembered, I was supposed to check up on the progress of the outbreak containment on Corellia on my way back. I'll have to leave in the morning. I can't believe I forgot. Andrea chuckled a little as she started moving the motivator back towards the shuttle. It's not impossible. Grinning, Callista followed and helped her maneuver it back into place. I was enjoying my time here so much that it just slipped my mind. It happens, Andrea told her as they locked it down and started to replace the whole panel. When I go to Coruscant with Daddy for matters concerning my training, it's definitely a lesson in patience for wanting to come home. It's the same way with me sometimes. Corellia was my home for a long time. There we go, she said as she dogged the hull plate in. She called the remote to her hand and started bringing the tarmac back up to the hangar level. They say detachment is important in the old order, but I just couldn't see that with us now. Things that have been part of our lives for so long, they are very hard to separate from. I know. They reached the hangar level and Andrea stepped off first, letting Callista touch the rock before she began to send the shuttle back up to the ground level. That was interesting. I didn't know that much about motivators. Well, there's a lot of practical stuff that some of the Jedi on Coruscant don't feel as important, Andrea said as they walked back towards the stairway to the house. Daddy has always disagreed with some of that practice. I mean, if you learn how to fly the ship, you just need to know how to repair it. Exactly. I'm glad I knew how. It comes from tinkering in my free time. All Andrea could do was grin as they started up the stairs. We may be different in some ways, Callista, but I'm really starting to like you. Alright. And I think that will be the end of our reading for this evening. Does anybody have any questions about our 2 chapters that we read tonight? You can use the story fact command if you like, or just post questions in chat. In Harpax, I'm going to preempt you a little bit with the med command. I'm just going to go ahead and take it since I've got my water right here. Oh, you're welcome. I'm having a lot of fun, and I hope that you guys are too. Thanks. Yeah. I'm really enjoying being able to share the stories with you guys. Like I said, it's a little bit nerve-wracking, I guess, is the right word. I haven't really shared these with anybody outside of a handful of people, but it's actually really interesting getting to read them and share them with you all and try and do the voices. I have a really hard time doing male voices, obviously, but I'm really enjoying it. Okay. Anybody have any questions before we call it for the evening? Oh, thanks. I appreciate it. I suppose that I have my last job to thank for helping me get over my nervousness with public speaking of any kind, really. Um, at my last job, I was a human resources assistant, so what I ended up having to do was I was the one that was conducting all of the interviews, so I had to get over my fear of public speaking and being recorded really fast. So it definitely helped, I think. I don't know what I would have done if I didn't have that experience. Oh, yeah, I'm sure. But yes, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask in chat. I'm gonna hang out for a little bit longer just in case. So. Yeah, I never did debate in high school, but I can imagine how nerve-wracking that would be. I do a lot of work with youth groups, so between that and everything that I did at my last job, I had to get over being in front of people really quickly. So, I don't know if I will be streaming tomorrow night. I have some things to do to get ready. Oh, excuse me. For, oops. I have some things to do to get ready for my weekend, so I don't know if I'll be able to stream tomorrow night, but I'm definitely trying to get my 7 days of streaming in, because I'm trying to go for affiliate, so I will see. If I can't, yes, if I can't stream tomorrow night, I will definitely stream again on Wednesday, as my schedule says. So, if I don't see you guys tomorrow night, I will see you guys on Wednesday. Thank you so much for hanging out, and I hope you enjoyed our chapters that we read this evening. Oops. Try that again. There we go. Thank you, everybody, for joining me this evening. Camera's being weird. Anyway, there we go. Have a great night, everybody, and I will see you on Wednesday unless I decide to stream tomorrow. Thank you so much. Bye, guys. Actually, hold on. Do we have anybody that's... Do I have anybody streaming that we could read? We do. We do. Oh, just as I'm ending, of course. Oh no! That's okay, Celia. Make sure that they're turned on, please. Yes. Definitely go watch the VOD if you came in just now. So it'll be up as soon as I'm done streaming, but I will try to hang out because apparently I'm going to be rated, so... I was gonna go raid somebody, but if I'm gonna be raided, I might as well wait. Yay! Fourth wall! Awesome. Yay! That's exciting! You'll have to get me the link later. Okay. Yeah, I was gonna try and raid out myself actually, for the first time ever. So I'm gonna go raid. If Demon's raiding out, I will not raid him. So I'm going to find somebody else to raid. Give me just 1 second. There's a couple of people that I follow, so. Okay. If I can type today, that would be great. We're gonna go raid Cat's Tales. Some of you might know her from Stay Alive 7 community. She is currently playing Helldivers. Unfortunately, I don't have emotes of my own yet, so gather your favorite emotes. And if somebody could set up a raid message for me to post in chat, that would be wonderful. I can try and set one up, but I don't have any fancy emotes yet. So. Let's see. Trying not to steal people's emotes for my raid message. Oh, thank you. Oh, that's a good one. I will have to make that a command. Thank you. Alright. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'm going to go ahead and start the raid. No, it's fine. So the raid is started.